Welcome to my build. This is for a stand that holds 24 tanks. Holds 10 gallons on top, 10 gallons on second level, and 275s and 220 highs on the bottom. These are my notes. Now the way I design it, you can see it's fairly simple here, not a whole lot going on. Main thing is to find out what surface area you want to work with and how many tanks you want to put on it. Then how many levels you want to go. On the first is up just kind of a rough draft of what it's going to look like and me figuring out the height of it. Then on the bottom was figuring out the top size and all that, and then by the 2x4 sizes is the size of the, let's see, it'll be length and then height and then depth, then the top sizes on the bottom. So there's not a whole lot of design put into it, but they'll definitely be strong enough to hold. These are my notes. I thought I'd go ahead and share with you. I decided to share with you guys how I build my stand since I'm building one. Now I know there's many ways to build stands, but this is the way I've always done it and the way that works for me. Here you see I already got my wood pre-cut, which I cut it myself, but you can get them pre-cut or have somebody cut them at some stores. And got them all to my sizes, the length, the depth, and the height. Now I got my tops all cut out. And as I was painting this, I decided I'll go ahead and share with you guys. I didn't know if I was going to have time or really could take time to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways, just so you guys can see how I build my stand. So here's my tops. I'm going to go ahead and finish painting these, and I'll give you guys some more videos here in a second. Before I started painting these, I did sand them all down, make sure the edges were smooth. Everything I cut here too was with a circular saw, just a hand circular saw. As long as you use a nice straight edge for your lines, you shouldn't have any problem cutting them clean. And it doesn't have to be perfect either. When you put it together, you can kind of tweak them a little bit to get them to line up, match up, and level out, which I'll show you that later when I do start to build. So I'm going to finish painting these now and I'll get back to you guys. I wanted to share with you guys a couple tips when painting plywood. You see here, see how it's not all the way in there? And you'll get this a lot with painting the plywood. And the way I get the paint into that is just to push hard on the roller. And I'll squeeze the paint in there. And don't worry about your lines. Your lines will actually fade in to the paint once it dries, and it'll look like this, all nice and smooth. So those lines weren't all even. I tried to keep it even, do like a half and half, not get too crazy with it, but it'll still blend in. And also another tip is when you're doing your edges on the side here, you want to do it when the roller's dry. Or well, not dry, but not sopping wet. That way you don't have a lot of extras on the edges here. It doesn't stick over and drip and run and all that stuff. So it doesn't really take much paint to cover the sides here. Just a couple painting tips I wanted to give you guys in case you guys don't do it much. I mean, I've gotten used to painting these so much, I know how many globs of paint rolls go on each half of them. But yeah, I'm gonna keep at it, maybe put a second coat. I might just stick with one. We'll see. This is the type of paint I use, which, funny enough, when you first open it, it is kind of bluish, but when it does dry, it does turn black. Now this is indoor outdoor, so if it gets wet, it has some protection. So that's very helpful with a fish stand. It's semi-gloss black, so it's not too shiny, but not too flat. And that's the paint I like to use. Another tip, when you're not using your paint, you can cover it up with a plastic bag. That'll keep it wet from drying out from the sun or anything. It's always good to move it out of the sun too, just won't hurt. That plastic bag will keep it wet. Sometimes you gotta wait for times to dry and it'll take longer, and you want to keep redoing the paint, so this will save it. Now I got my plywood all painted, ended up putting 2 coats on it just to kind of seal it up better and give it a better shade. But I got all my 2x4s lined up and I'll just go down and paint them all. But I wanted to share with you how I sand them down. I use one of these sanding blocks, the rougher paper on it. I can't remember what the grit number is. But yeah, just use that, make it easy, just go against the edges real quick. Takes like no time to do. But I'm gonna go ahead and do that with all these. Never said it was the easiest way to do it, but they're strong, they'll last forever. I put a lot of weight on them, so I better get this done. I wasn't able to get it all painted during the day, during the sunshine. Had some stuff to do, like feeding and ferting all the tanks and some random fish moving and whatnot. Did end up winning some rainbow fish off of Gary Lange, which was pretty awesome. But yeah, just to get stuff done, sometimes you gotta do some night painting, so let's put this light up, do a little light painting, which this weather is probably not the best because it's so humid out here. It's going to take forever to dry. I was hoping to build this tonight, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. You really don't have to go through all this process, but I figured if I'm going to have something for a while, for a long time, I'm going to want to make it nice and paint it up and stuff. But sanding and painting and all that, that's really optional. So yeah, get it done. So I just got done painting everything. Thinking about my next steps and putting it together. And looking at my notes here, I just realized that I built it wrong. I cut the 12 here. See where that's scribbled out? I second guessed myself, which I shouldn't have. And now it's a little shorter. I put the ones that go on the side like outside of the long ones. If you look here on my stands, you can see where I have the long board that connects to the sideboard, and then the in-betweens are in between the depth ones. And they're all like that. But now I have the side ones coming out. So this only poses one problem, is after I screw the side ones into the long ones, I'm going to have 2 screws here, which is going to get in the way of the way I screw them. And that is going to be a little bit of an issue, but I'm going to just sit down, think about it a little bit, and see if I can't come up with a solution. Because I really don't want to cut that wood again and paint it again. That doesn't sound like fun. But this is the section that I'm actually replacing right here. Is this table. I've kind of been gambling with this table. As you notice, I leave the water low on a lot of these tanks. Of course, if it did buckle, I've got a bunch of glass tanks underneath it to catch its fall, just in case. But yeah, it's time to upgrade that, and hopefully I can get this figured out. Okay, so the night painting didn't work out as well as I'd hope it would. The humidity yesterday was just too much, so it did leave a couple marks on the other side of these boards, but it's not a big issue. Some of them are going to be hidden anyways, and I can just touch them up after I finish building the stand. So sometimes you just gotta kind of roll with the punches. This hasn't been the most ideal project since I've kind of been in a time rush trying to get this done, because I've got a limited amount of time to get a lot of stuff done, and I'm always behind the 8 ball. So this kind of happens when you try to rush things and whatnot. Like I said, it's not a big issue, just touch it up after we build. Before I start building, I like to pre-drill a lot of the holes. Now I know where they're gonna lay on the boards when I drill, especially the first ones. They're gonna be on the bottom on the legs, which I'll kind of show you. You'll see that as I put it together. But I like to get a bit that's just a little smaller, loosen that hole. That's a star bit. It's just a little smaller than the screw. Make your life a lot easier. You don't have to fight it so much. Still gets a nice bite. So now I'm going to make a few pre-drilled holes. Also, when you put your bit on, always make sure to put it on the solid part. Never put the bit on where it's got the grooves, because that's an easy way to snap your bit. You gotta be careful not to put too much pressure on them too when they're smaller. This is a 7/64, so it's not real thick, and last thing you want to do is break it and then have to run to the store. Since I know these longer ones here are my legs, I know I'm going to want 4 screw holes down here at the bottom for the base of it. I drilled me out 4 holes. It's about that size, about the size of a 2x4. Put it up there and kind of see where it's going to land on another 2x4. Just kind of right in the middle, good brace. You try not to put too many holes in the wood, because that'll take away from the integrity of the wood. But as long as you place them out with a good width like that, it'll be nice and sturdy. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill all these out. Then the other one, usually what I would do, I would take these side pieces. Actually, I didn't even drill those out. But I would do, these would be the front edges. They are supposed to ideally overlap, but the way I designed it was kind of messed up. But just gonna roll with the punches here. What I normally would do is just go through the face 1, 2, because the square that I'm about to build, it holds some of the weight, but the tabletop is what really helps with the weight distribution and where all the weight goes. But my way around that is now I'm gonna have to angle in holes from the side, which is kind of hard to do with one hand without holding it. But essentially I'll just have to toe it in like that. Get it on the side here. Toe it in like that. That way I can get a screw in there. I won't eat up too much of the sideboards. And I can still get a good grab off the legs, and that's what's the most important. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill all these out and see where we go from there. Okay, now some tips for drilling. Now when you're drilling your holes, you always want to make sure you're straight up and down, and you're going the direction you want the screw to go to, because if you drill in any angle, that's where the screw is going to go. So you always want to make sure you're straight and you go the direction you want your screw to go. And just like these ones that I had to angle here, I angled them in like that. That way I can just shoot it in there sideways. But you always want to make sure you got enough meat right here on the side. You don't want to get too close to the edge, because when the head of that screw comes down, it'll try to bulge that in. And don't crank on it, because these front ends, they're actually not going to hold that much weight. They're more or less for support in the middle and just kind of keep the square together. I also knew I would end up having to put one of the squares up on the top and bottom, so I did drill top and bottom out, and I'll let you guys know what I mean when I'm talking about a square. You'll see what that is when I actually put it together. It'll kind of simplify things too. Also, when you drill, you flip it over, notice on the back of it you got all these pieces of wood that stick up. Now I just use my hands, my fingers, just kind of smooth them out. They just kind of flake off. But if you don't like to do that, so you got sensitive fingers, you can use a sanding block as well. But it's good to get these out of the way, because when you try to put them together, they're not going to really make a nice connection. They'll have that little buffer in them. So this will help make it nice and square and flush. Also wanted to note that I ended up painting this and cutting all the pieces and all that stuff on a hill. It's not quite the flattest land to be really doing this kind of project, but since my garage is full of fish tanks now, I was kind of left with this space, so I just did it anyways, even though it's not the safest. So no excuses, just gotta get it done, right? So this was a big reason I was in a hurry to get the stand done as well. You notice this table is already puffed out a bit from some water and moisture that got into it. That would have been bad if that table would have fallen on all those other glass tanks. So definitely a big reason why I needed to hurry up and get it done. Okay, so I got all my boards inside, ready to go. Got my pieces up, ready to get screwed on. And here I got the front faces, the long ones. You want to pick the best side as far as paint job or whatnot, and you can put the not so well sides inside where nobody's going to see them. Now usually I would just have to screw right through here, boom boom, I'd be done. Actually it'd be in the front, more like this. This is how I usually do it, but I really screwed myself. I just hit it in, boom boom, done. But since I didn't take the time like I should have and really planned it out right and double checked myself and paying for it. Now, since I am paying for it, see, usually I just have to use these 3-inch deck screws. That's all I gotta use. I could do the whole build with those. And I choose these exterior deck screws because they're strong. They last forever. If they ever get wet, it's not a problem. They can stand up to humidity. And but now, since I gotta do it this way, I've gotta also incorporate this 2.5-inch screw, which ideally I'd want like maybe a 2 1/4 or a 2-inch. This is pushing a little far because if you see down here, you want the meat of the screw to actually go about halfway in there. This screw's, it's gonna go a little closer to the edge than I'm gonna want. But see, the way it's gonna lay out is these screws are gonna be in like this. Ideally it'd be like that if I had some shorter screws, but this is just a little longer. But then they'll be bowed in on the bottom like that. So boom boom. That way when I do put my legs on, which are gonna go right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here, I'm not hitting those screws. Since they're angled in, I still got this meat to hit without really taking away from the integrity of this part of the board. I'm also gonna have a screw in here, so that'll help. And now I just gotta start putting my screws in together, build my square here, and we'll move on from that. A big thing about building stands like this too is when you are starting off with these squares, these bases, it's good to make sure they're all flat, flush, which means that's all even there, and then plumb here, straight and even. But as far as being level, you don't have to worry about leveling it yet. So I'll show you a little trick and tip for how I level them. So just make sure it's nice and square and flush and plumb, and you'll be good. Also, another tip, when drilling, sometimes you'll see how I'm drilling that in, but it's not going flush there, so that causes issue. Now all you gotta do is back it in, square it up a little more. Kind of hard to do holding the phone. Put a little pressure on it. Pull out on the phone, but see how I tightened it up? Just slowly crank it. You don't want to over crank either. You over crank on it, you'll start chewing up the wood. But yeah, all you gotta do is make sure that you just go out, put the screw in, and if you get that resistance, pull back out, and then push back in, and it'll go in nice and smoothly. To get the screws on the bottom, I just kind of flipped it up here and screwed it in real quick. And if you see here, it's not perfectly level or plumb, but that's the way it laid on the floor, and like I said, it's not going to make a difference by the time I put the top in. I'll show you that trick. Okay, so the next step here is on this base piece. This is going to be the bottom part that's going to hold two 75s, which the 75's depth is around 18.5. So what I've done here is went ahead and marked 18.5 and did it on both sides. And you see how it's not square in the middle, but since I'm putting a third leg in the middle here that'll go up and help support this for the tins going up, which I'll show you guys that. But since this is on the ground, I don't have to worry about that support being there, because all this weight's going to be on the ground. But it is good for the top, just to keep from any sagging, and just kind of like secondary support. Putting two, I'd probably get away with just putting one in here instead of two, but kind of overkill. But I'd rather have it last long, and it's better to over-engineer than to under-engineer. And sometimes these boards in the middle, they'll want to fit tight, especially with the paint or whatever. But you can kind of flex the ends and then just kind of knock it over to where you need to put it, which it's kind of easier to do with two hands than one hand, so you can hold. But yeah, it's just best to put it in diagonally kind of, and then just kind of push it around to where you need to. And if you gotta hit it, hit it. Okay, so the first base square here is built, and I'll be building a total of 3 squares. So the next 2 will be the same. Now I'll start construction on those, and that way I won't have to switch the screw tip around so much. I can just keep the same screw tip in. Save me some time, which is always good. Now I got the second square here built, and on these levels I'm going to be putting 10-gallon long ways on each side. So 10-gallon going long way that way, 10-gallon long way going the other way. And if I was just building this rack for a single tank, it would just be like that half of a square. But since you need some brace for the back, it's always good to put these in the middle to kind of help support the tanks when you're going double-sided. But here, sorry guys, I'm real tired. I've been pushing a lot of hours with not very much sleep. And another note, it's always good to have some sleep and rest before doing projects like this. It helps from errors and whatnot. But yeah, each one laid out at 20 inches, which it doesn't quite line up, but I'm just going to butt them in the middle so it makes a nice strong support for them. So now I just got to do this twice and I'll be done with my squares and be ready to put the legs on. Okay, so I got my 3 squares built here. Those are the 2 top ones that are going to hold the tins. Will be 10 gallons on each one. And then this one will be the 275s and 220s. This is going to be my base. And another big reason why sleep's important is accidents happen. I put the drill speared me in the hand. Luckily it didn't go any deeper. I thought it was going to be worse, but luckily it wasn't. But yeah, just shake it off, keep going. Now I'm putting legs on here. So I'll go up and down like that. I have one there, one here, and of course over here. So I'll go ahead and start putting these 4 or 6 legs on. And then we'll work up to the next level from there. And on the legs here, I'll be using these 3-inch exterior screws. Also wanted to point out that these may be a little flimsy. See how it rocks a little bit? Especially since I didn't get to put this side piece on the inside. It's usually more stable if you can do that, but this is okay. Like I said, the top is actually going to make a lot of difference and be the magic of it. Another tip, now that I'm able to build this normally, is you can go ahead and put the screws in ahead of time before you screw them all in. That way you can just grab the piece and start screwing it in on the side. And as you notice, I'm building in the garage. A lot of garages are built with a slope. So as far as the level, even if I put a level on it, it wouldn't be level. So it's best to just kind of let it square itself up. And with these legs, you do kind of want to make sure they're straight and make sure they're flat on the ground and nice and even there when you put them on. Okay, now I got the 6 legs up. They're ready to go. Next step is to get this second level on. The way I go about that is I went ahead on my notes and figured out the height of what I'm wanting the bottom of this to start out with. So the 75 is 21 high, and I want at least a 9-inch gap to get in and out of the tanks. So I'll go from the bottom of this, and I gotta add, I actually ended up with a 1/2-inch board. So I'll go ahead and go 30.5 off of this mark. What I'll do is I'll just mark it on here with the pin, 30.5 on all 6 legs. What I'm gonna have to do is I'll have to balance this up by myself, put it on there, and again I'll go ahead and pre-drill the holes before I go ahead and try to get that up there. And so I'm going to go ahead and mark this out and get the holes pre-drilled. Okay, so I got it all marked out and the holes drilled out. If you see here, you can sort of barely see my marks. Actually, this one's better because I mismarked it first. And you can see I mark it on both ends, and then I pretty much guesstimate on that. But if you're not good or trust yourself at guessing, you could always put a 2x4 up and get you another mark, or just measure up 3 more inches. That'll give you a good idea of where you need to be at for your drill holes. And also, since I did drill on the inside here, I did blow out the outside, but I was going to end up doing some touch-up painting anyway, so I wasn't going to take the time to go ahead and try to mark it outside and get my holes that way. So now, next step is to get this second level here up. And I'm not going to be able to do that definitely with the phone in my hand. Probably going to take my head, a leg, and both my arms for sure. But go ahead and try to get that done. Also, another trick on this part is, once again, to go ahead and put your screws in first. Now if you notice, I still don't have the level out, and this is important, is you need to trust your marks and make sure they are right, because you're going to want to lay the bottom edge of that board right at your marks, and just as long as you're on your mark or close to it, you're going to be fine. Okay, so I got the second level up here, the second square, and as you see here, nobody was home to give me a hand, so I had to make me a helper. I just used my sawhorses and a couple 2x4s. Now I wasn't exactly where I needed to be, but it was enough where I could just lift it up and get it started on the marks where I needed to. Just kind of hit each corner real quick and then went back through and made sure it was all ready to screw in. So next step is the top one. Now for this third level here, instead of waiting for somebody to give me a hand with it, I ended up using these braces here, which you can see I got a screw in there. I didn't screw it in all the way, but it's enough for me to hold it up here to flush it up to where I need to while I screw it in from the side. So that's a nice little trick. Doesn't really damage anything, so yeah, just another tip and trick. And I just gotta screw this on and then we'll be ready to put tops on. Okay, so the third level's on there. Now I'm ready to go ahead and put the tops on, but first I want to move it to where I want it to be. And this is when I'll finally break out the level, because this is where the level comes into play. And the beauty part about this method is it works well with when you can't get good wood, because I know sometimes 2x4s these days it's kind of hard to find good ones. And also it'll always be adjustable, so if I did move it somewhere else one time, then all I'd have to do is just unscrew the plywood and readjust where need be, which I'll show you that method here coming up. Also wanted to share with you guys, I got the garage door open here so the sunshine's coming through. It's always cool to see the tanks when the sun's shining through them. That one's just glowing. I love how fish look too with the sun on them. This 125's looking neat. There's a rainbow there. It's bathing in the sun. I figure I'd get some fish in here too. Can't be all work. Okay, so I got my bottom top on here. As you can see, it's just flush on there. I haven't had to put any shims on here. I haven't used the level yet to build this, but this is level. That side's level. All four sides are level. So that makes this part easy, which I'm sure I'll have to level the second row. Usually happens. But the base is nice and level. That's always a good sign. And when I do shim, I like to use these composite shims here. They blend in better and they're resistant to water, so you can get them wet, not a big issue. But yeah, that's a good start there. And if you notice, I level it on all four. I always check all four. So I'm gonna work on this second one here. After you get done screwing your tops in, you always want to make sure that you get that little bit of wood that's sticking up there, because when you go to set a tank on it, it can make it all lopsided. big note about building this way, it's always important to wait to level until you got it placed exactly where you want it to be. That way you can level it to that specific location. Okay, so I ended up getting all 3 tops on. Lucky enough, I got some weights there because the board was warped a bit. This board was a little warped too. But yeah, actually all levels were level, so I didn't even have to add shims. I'll go ahead and show you guys that when you do shimming, all you're doing is, if it's not within the bubbles, you put it up to wherever you need it to be, shim it in there, and then you can break these shims apart, and then there you go, you got what you need. And you probably want to incline yourself down into the middle, depending, just following the incline, just to give a little support in between here too, if you do have to tweak it. But luckily I didn't have to tweak it. So yeah, that's it. I mean, the stand's built. Now I just got to get tanks on it, get some lights going, get the air running, and I'll go ahead and do a separate series on that, maybe as a part 2. But yeah, and a couple things about this build is, it wasn't the prettiest. It's not how I normally do it, obviously, and I'll go ahead and share, like, this is how I normally build it, by going through the side and got that. But if you look on this rack, it's built different too, so it doesn't always have to be the same, as long as you got good support, putting screws in the right place to support. Same with this. And another thing too, when I cut my tops, I always like to cut the top to go over this 2x4, that way it kind of takes a little weight off the top, just a little extra support. This one actually holds 2 125s. That one took a little while to design, but yeah, things might not always go the way they're supposed to, and it's definitely sturdy now. You're not going to move it. And yeah, if there's a will, there's a way. Even though there's bumps in the road, you just got to keep at it. And see, this stand's a little different. This is the only stand I've built different that's not out of 2x4s. It just takes up a lot of space. It was quick though. I built it in a day, and it's fairly cheap. But yeah, that's how I build my stands. Thanks for watching.